Hi, Elisa.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm just so excited to chat with you. It's been so long. And for everyone listening, you guys, Elisa Haggarty, I could probably attribute being on this path to you, my friend. You've been my health coach, you've been my business coach, you've been my mentor, and like my biggest cheerleader at the beginning. And I could probably even take it a step further and say I could attribute Gratisifed to you because I feel as if you taught me how, and I don't think like picky is the right word. I'm going to say like highly selective
Mm.
of, if I was to eat like packaged foods, like what kind of foods and brands those would be. And especially when it came to packaged bars. Like honestly, I think like every time I would have to eat a bar on the go, like I could hear your voice in the back of my head. And since it was like never, I could never choose one with like 100% conviction. I just went out and I created one.
Yep,
So
you did.
I
Well,
can probably,
it's been such a pleasure, honestly, to connect with you years ago in so many different ways and to see you grow and continue to, follow the breadcrumbs, which is something I'm still doing in life. Will probably always
yes.
be doing. And I'm just really proud of you for creating the thing that you needed most. And I think as a creative and entrepreneur, that's the path and that's the process. And it's already a win-win in that situation for you. So I'm just stoked to see this next evolution of your career.
No, thank you. And I mean, I really do, same to you. I've been watching you and your journey, especially with the shifts and the moves that you've made in terms of health coaching and then working for Parsley Health. And you are just such an inspiration to me because I think I always had it in the back of my mind, like, why can't I just choose a thing? Right? Like, why can't I just like do a thing and then that be the end all be all? And like, I had this like guilt almost that I was just like malcontent because I kept on taking these pivots. And I actually spoke last year on a panel for women entrepreneurs, and it was called like Women Who Pivot. And I was like, well, I like to almost think about it as like an evolutionary unfolding because I honestly think like everything that I've done has been a stepping stone, if you will, to like the next thing. And it was never like, I think pivot, the word pivot or change, or I can't make up my mind, like that almost like brought in this like negative connotation around it where I was like, if you can kind of look back in hindsight and be like, yeah, this all makes sense on like why it unfolded that way.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. Sure.
and and that kind of brings me to my first question because when we were working together, from the time that I took your very first like blood sugar boot camp,
Hmm.
to then taking a course that you were doing on brain health, like I kind of just want to, for anyone who doesn't know you and your story, for you to just kind of tell people kind of how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Well, I guess the sort of shortened version of it is that, I thought I was going to be a high school English teacher my whole life. It was the only subject I excelled in school. Um, I didn't really love academia, but I loved people and I love stories. And so that made sense to me.
Mm.
But when I graduated college, I taught for 4 years. I taught in America. I taught in Hong Kong. I lived a really cool, dynamic life teaching English lit. And along the way, though, I got into a pretty bad car accident where I had basically a really bad concussion, almost like a traumatic brain injury in some capacity, but probably not diagnosed. Anyway, the next day I woke up and I was, for the first time ever, super anxious and clinically depressed. And it was obviously due to the head trauma. And at the
Yeah.
time, I was only 22 and just graduated college, and I was embarking on that teaching career, but I had to fight for myself. I had to fight for the next couple of years to revamp my diet, to embrace meditation, to embrace spirituality, because I wasn't well, I wasn't okay. I mean, I was functional. I did my job. I did the things I needed to do. I think as a college athlete too, I played basketball in college. You don't sit around and lay around in bed all day. So I wasn't one of those people who had depression and couldn't do anything. I was just hyper productive and I just crushed through things. And, that was good because I think it gave me a sense of structure, but I was also still really suffering from like a neuroinflammation perspective. And then also from like a spiritual perspective, I felt sort of this onslaught of darkness I'd never had before. So, and I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that stuff because it's like not sexy, but I have to say that like it's kind of the norm. And you don't have to have a car
Yeah.
accident to have had experienced that. But the more and more I'm in this world, the more and more I'm surprised when I find women who haven't had some variation of that experience, to be honest. So I was teaching English and I started to realize I should learn how to feed myself. And I went from eating like, Kit Kats for snacks to Power Bars. I went from eating like Frosted Flakes for cereal to eating like a blueberry smoothie. I mean, I really was a traditional American diet eater for the most part. I knew what vegetables were, but since I was such an athletic young woman, I didn't really see any physical reason why I should shift the way I ate. So I shifted the way I ate because my brain and my mood depended upon it. And I started to get up early. I started to wake up at 8 a.m. and 7 a.m. just naturally. And it was because I was no longer having these like crazy sugar highs and sugar lows. And so I taught myself that. And then at one point I realized that I cared more about teaching people how to eat and have a relationship with their body and their food than I did about grammar and stories and poems. I felt like I was meant to be a teacher, but in a different capacity. So I think in 2010, 2011, I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition online. And then I started to practice in Hong Kong. I started to teach cooking classes in my apartment for a couple of friends just for free, just to get experience. I started to work with any friend who wanted to work with me on how to lose weight, be happier, sleep better. And I just, learned what I learned through experience. And then I knew I needed more clinical experience and like knowledge. So I went to the Natural Gourmet Institute, which was a culinary institute for health supportive cooking. I learned how to cook vegetables for the first time in my life. And then I started to study under Andrea Nakayama, who's one of the leading functional medicine and nutrition experts out there. And so basically up until 2018, 2019, I was working with people and consulting with people. I ran a lot of online courses, partnered with a lot of local medical professionals. And I'm proud that I helped thousands of people in their path find better health. And that kind of brought me to its own standstill, though. It ran its course. My interest in like focusing just on nutrition ran its course. And then it evolved into a lot of mindset and emotional regulation, which is sort of the space that I live now. In terms of when I work with people one-on-one, it's a lot of that. And my full-time job is I work for Parsley Health, which is a functional medicine practice in New York City, SF, and LA. And we're actually now in almost all 50 states virtually offering great comprehensive care. So I run learning and development for Parsley Health, which means I'm like the teacher of the clinicians and the teacher of all the Parsley Health employees.
That's amazing. And yeah, I've, listened to the founder of Parsley Health. Remind me of her name. She's brilliant doctor. Yes, I've listened to some podcasts, and I think she was at Mind Body Green's conference when I was there. She's absolutely brilliant, and I think what she's doing is amazing, and I want to kind of get into that a little bit later. But it's so interesting to me to hear you talk about when you started to really delve into even just the shifts in healthy eating, because I can't imagine you any other way. But just like myself, it's just you grow up eating the standard American diet and those foods that you were raised on. And I think just like you, I remember the first class that I gave was food and mood. And so, so many people don't understand the connection with that. But what I find really interesting is the more lifestyle mindset, spiritual piece. Because, as I was health coaching, and it initially took on kind of a more, I don't want to say surface level approach, but like, the nutrition, the food. And then you quickly realize that there's something deeper for a lot of people, women especially, who have like a very emotional attachment to food. And everybody has a food story and everybody has a relationship with it. So talk to me a little bit more about the role that like more of these lifestyle practices like meditation or journaling or picking up a spiritual practice or what have you plays in kind of someone's health journey.
How do they play in anyone's health journey, or mine, or just broadly like what the powerful effects?
Both, and like kind of what you saw with health coaching and like the impact that it had once someone, because I'm sure for a majority of people when they come to a health coach, they're not expecting to really talk about meditation and things like that. But did you find as if that was almost kind of like the missing piece for a lot of people? And did you find that there was a lot of blocks with that? I
started with a lot of like, sort of reductionist approach mindset to like protein, fat, fiber, like eat within an hour of working out and do all these things. And I think that those are really good boundaries. I still live by them. I still eat that way. I'm very flexible now with like I play with my diet a lot now, but I think that at some point, you're right, you do become very keenly aware that you're working with humans, not diet plans. And
Right.
humans need to be nurtured, and people need to get out of their head and into their body. And so, if we're going to teach people how to understand what they crave and how to understand what foods are causing them GI distress or skin distress, they have to be detectives of their own body. They have to be in their body. And I think a lot of the reasons that people struggle with finding the root cause, or even just finding some progress in their symptom management, or eradication, is they're not in their body. They're in their head. They're convinced that it's elsewhere. They're convinced that they need to have someone tell them exactly what to do. And so I think that the part of asking people to meditate, or even just take 3 deep breaths before a meal, would be a huge milestone for most people. It's an encouragement to come back to the self, which ultimately, in the self-care journey, you have to do. We can't buy into spiritual bypassing, where we like biohack our way out of like bad emotions, and we eat our way to like perfect optimal health all the time. I think there's a lot of, and I've bought into it and sort of like played with it over the years too, there's a lot of like escapism in this world of like, live what's your optimal life. And sometimes life is just life. Sometimes you're constipated and you have a rash, and like you have to learn how to sit with that. Like, like
Yeah.
sorry, like you sit with it, you investigate it, you figure out what the triggers are. But you can't do that if you don't know how to breathe, if you don't know how to meditate. So to me, it's just a coming back to the self, and it's something that no one can ever escape. There's no way you could get all the degrees you want. You can have a PhD in neuroscience, but you have to learn how to come back to the body and to the self. So when I first started on this path, it actually wasn't about food. I got into Buddhism and meditation because,
Mm.
depression and anxiety was so intense for me at that very young age, and I was so startled by it. And so I thought, well, if I can sit with my body, and if I can sit with my thoughts and be the observer, then, I can diffuse the energy. So it's still a
Mhm.
tool I think I use often. And I think it's the first step to really having like a um, independent, like sort of relationship with food and with your body. So
Yeah. No, and I think that's really powerful. And, and I'll fully admit, like, even during, COVID time or whatever, and how, and I'm sure pretty much everyone felt this way, that I think if it was to be the biggest teacher, it's that there's a lot in this life that we can't control. Like, you can kind of, like, I remember talking to someone about the turn of the new year and how I had
mm,
like this laundry list of things I wanted to do in 2020, and how everyone was talking about it was going to be this, like, the year of the vision, and you're going to
yeah.
like, so, but I think it was like one of those things where it's like, all right, humans, like, you can't control as much as you think you did. But I found myself, especially, um, personally and professionally, because I felt so out of control and that anxiety rose up, I found myself going to an old mental pattern of mine, which is to try and control in the realm of the physical,
Mm-hmm.
whether that was through what I ate or how I exercised,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And I think so many people are in that when it comes to their health, and they don't have the self-awareness or the ability to step back as an observer and be like, oh, this is just an old mental habit of mine. Like, what's really going on here? Because if I didn't have that awareness, and I was just, again, like in that cycle of like trying to control things on the physical realm, like I could have just, again, like as I have in my past, just made myself miserable. So I think that's really great what you said about how people just need to be in their body and be curious with it, right? And, kind of watching you over the years, I know when I first met you, I think you had a heavy hand in like veganism, right? And knowing that, like, that's, you've had your own journey with, not to put a label on the way you eat or anything, but how you said you still kind of play around with it. So I think when people can be curious and be in their body and know that, like, the way that I eat now isn't the same as how I ate a year ago or 2 years ago, or might not be how it is, 6 months down the road, but you just kind of got to, um, be your own, like, student, if you will, in the face of it. So I'd be curious to know, because you are such a wealth of knowledge, from blood sugar, to metabolic health to brain health. Like, what is kind of, if you had to, like, not a blanket approach, but like how you eat or how you coach people on nutrition, like what's like the closest thing in terms? of like a
Well,
way
I
of.
mean, I don't coach people on nutrition anymore, but I coach them on emotional regulation and something called
Mhm,
emotional agility. And
mhm,
so I think ultimately that to me has a lot to do with sort of a construct of people still come to me asking them to help them with their diet for sure. It's a big
mhm,
piece of, I think, still just the residual effects of having done this for 10 years.
mhm.
Um, but ultimately, when I dig a little deeper and ask a few questions, we realize that it has nothing to do with what's on their dinner plate. It doesn't have to do with their snacks. It has to do with generally coming from a place of toxic fear, scarcity, control, wanting approval, wanting security. And these are all sort of like levels of consciousness that are very much primal. They make sense. They're rooted in like human evolution. They're protective. But and sometimes there's social mechanisms too that we use to like stay connected, right?
Mhm.
But what I do is I work with people on identifying limiting beliefs and limiting thought patterns that are leading
Mm.
them to believe that their snack or their dinner is the root cause of their problem. And they start to see that, in fact, it's not.
Yeah.
And play with that then. And then we say, well, what is it? Like, what are the constructs and beliefs that you set up to believe that you should be this weight or you should eat this way? Like, where did that come from? And so it's kind of just this like very winding road of like, if people are open and willing to be playful and to be curious about their human consciousness ultimately. And so the work I do with people is that,
Mhm.
and that's something that I did a little bit actually when I was running my own business. It was kind of natural for me to talk about emotions and food, but I always came back to food, and I always had people leave meetings with recipes and suggestions and eat this and don't eat this, and I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's not the work that people really need, and I think if they need that, they can find the right people elsewhere. So that's kind of my shift in the past 3 years.
That's amazing. And I think so many people can benefit even from just hearing that message and would definitely benefit from working with you. Do you find as if a lot of people who come to you or the people that you are working with that they have a block in sort of doing that work, which obviously is a lot deeper and can be a lot more uncomfortable. It can kind of like dredge up a lot of stuff. Do you have a lot of like hesitation from people with that?
Well, sure, I think there can be, but ultimately they don't end up working with me if they're not willing, and that's just very obvious. It's very obvious within the first hour or two. So I just end up kind of being very candid with them and saying, like, you're never going to leave with a meal plan or recipe. That's just not the work I offer anymore. The work I offer is let's dig into this so that this is no longer the bane of your existence and you can
Mhm.
actually enjoy your life. And one thing I try to tell people is that and this may be hard for people to understand, and I struggle with this too sometimes, is that nothing in your life has to change for you to be in a different state of consciousness. You don't have to lose 5 more pounds. You don't have to, get the job you want. You don't have to make peace with all the people around you. You don't have to live in a beautiful area for then things to happen. So a lot of the work I do with people is when they come to me and say like, I need to lose 10 pounds or I have GI distress or I have this, is like, okay, well, like nothing actually needs to change for us to be able to shift your energy and shift your thought patterns and shift your ultimately your neural habits. And when you do that, you end up having like a really profound downstream effect on the habits that they take, the thoughts they think, the words they speak, the actions that they take, the food that they eat ends up ultimately being affected by that.
Yeah.
And I also think too, it's important for people to understand it's so much less about what you eat these days. It's more about how you eat and
Hmm.
where you eat and who you eat with. I'm down the shore this week with my family in New Jersey, and since we're all in sort of COVID world, and I live actually, I'm at my own apartment in New York City. Pretty much a lot of my meals are by myself, which I kind of enjoy. But for the past week, I've gotten to eat meals with all the people who I grew up with, and there is like an
Hmm.
element of like overwhelm, anxiety, and also like kind of joy. Like, wow, like these are
Yeah.
the people who I saw when I was 9, 10, 11. So it's important to understand that we have a very culture obsessed world, a very obsessed culture where people are so obsessed about what they eat. Um,
Yeah.
there's formulas, there's ratios, there's macronutrients, there's recipes, and people have no freaking idea what it's like to like use their senses and like ask their friends what they want to eat and build a plate of food or build a recipe that is just reflective of like whatever is local and sustainable or like just available. Um,
Right.
so I think a lot of it is getting out of your own way and actually just enjoying how you eat and where you eat.
Exactly. And I think, I experienced this big time when 3 years ago, my husband Alex and I went backpacking for 3 months in Europe. And I mean, I will fully admit before then, like I was a very routine, rigid person, especially with my wellness, right? Like I had to work out 5 to 6 times a week. I was very kind of like no gluten, dairy, all the things. And then when I went over there and I was living out of a backpack, there wasn't any of that, right? Like there wasn't workouts. There was just there was exploration, and there was so much presence, and there wasn't Netflix while we were eating. Like it was, we were walking a lot, but we were, I ate, gluten, dairy, I drank wine every single night. And it was like, because it was just us at like a table, just, people watching or being in these beautiful surroundings, like I have never felt healthier. And so when I came back, and like that had a big influence on how I health coached, because I did probably didn't get in as in depth as you, because you just are another level. But it was like, women would come to me wanting to lose weight, and they would want me to tell them when, how much, and what to eat. And I was like, I can't really do that for you. I'm not in your body. But like, I think if you learn to develop a more positive relationship with yourself, because it's a societal thing, right? Like we're taught to pick up the shiny penny so that we can give ourselves a pat on the back, like lose the weight and then you'll be happy, get the job and then you'll be happy. But I think when people need to understand that, like, to be happy with themselves and then go about their wellness from a place of self-love, not like a punishment, or from a place of like should, or like that type of phenomenon, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's self-love. I also just think it's straight up curiosity and playfulness, like, and a sense of wonder and adventure. Like I think that part of our fear mechanism is we try to nail down life to be exactly how we want it to be. I want to look this way. I want to have this partner. I want to have this job and this income. And I like on some level, you can still pursue those, but how you pursue those things is going to make all the difference. Right. So, someone can pursue the body, the job, the partner, the lifestyle, the house with a sense of complete suffocation and like it has to be this way. Yeah. And then they end up suffering a lot because it's not the way life works. Right. And you could also get all those things on the outside level and still feel completely empty on the inside. And so I think, like, again, it's if you can approach life with a sense of like complete wonder and awe, like, whoa, like I am here for the first time ever in this body, in this moment, in this town, while the globe is moving and the world is moving and things are happening and we're in a pandemic. What's going to happen next? How cool. Yes. And we can even open up our mind to that sense of wonder. We begin to loosen our grip on this sense of control and this sense of security. And we begin to kind of follow the breadcrumbs and play with life. We begin to make a game out of things, and we begin to have more lightheartedness and joy. And I think I said this once recently on a podcast last week, is one thing I've learned in the past 4 or 5 years, and I still have to train myself to get out of it, but when I'm really serious about something, like something's bad and I got to talk to this person about this and this has to get fixed, like I'm suffering, like I'm straight up suffering, like the mental looping is going, and I am convinced that like I don't have a purpose in the planet, and I'll always be whatever the thing is in my mind.
That spiral,
so when I'm serious, I'm suffering. And when I learn how to play is the energy of love. And it's not control. Control is not something you can, associate with love, really.
Yeah. Exactly. It's why a lot of the time I have to pretend that I'm in the Mario Brothers game. Actually, I was telling my life coach this analogy that I have of, whenever I'm feeling that same way, I pretend that I'm in this video game, and that like I have to keep moving forward, and I have to, kind of jump over the fireball when I need to jump over the fireball. But other than that, I'm just kind of like walking around being like, ooh, like what's next? Like you can't really see it, right? Yeah. And you can't go back because the screen is a wall and it like pushes you forward. Yeah, right. No, it's, I think, especially in 2020 and COVID, especially, it's been like, I just want to play more. I just want to like feel that like childlike sense of wonder and awe. And, I was actually the same life coach, I was talking to her about boredom one time, and she goes, well, technically, if you're fully aware and conscious in the moment, there can never be boredom, because each moment is new. Like, even if you do the same things over and over, and even if you have a routine, like with consciousness, and because there's no control over anything technically, like each moment is new. So I think this is so amazing. It's such an important message for people to hear, that for anyone who's kind of like stuck in this like more like uptight, like needing to control for, especially in the physical realm. Like if you just kind of let go, and it can work wonders for sure. So I want to talk briefly just about, Parsley, and especially since we are in, COVID, and it's a very, it's important work in terms of seeing people like face to face, I'm sure before Corona. Like how have you and Parsley like continued to support people during this time? I guess it's all virtual now.
Yes. So I missed the first half of your question. Can you repeat the first half of the question?
Oh, yeah. Just saying, like, wanted to just talk briefly about Parsley, especially during this time and Corona, and how I'm sure it's still such an important organization to support people, especially in health. So how have they kind of made that shift and continue to support patients through this time?
Yeah, well, I mean, COVID's been devastating for the whole world on so many levels, and we can't escape that. I think it's forced a lot of businesses and people, though, to make decisions they would have waited on. And I think we made the decision to be a virtual practice. We still have centers in LA and New York City, and we might open more in the future. But I think that the future of functional medicine and comprehensive care is one that has to be digital, so that people can meet with us if they live in Pennsylvania and Oklahoma and Florida and Tennessee. I think that's important. And so ultimately we're on the path to be, fully activated or available in all 50 states by the end of this year. So that's really huge. We're more than halfway there. It's huge. It basically means that someone in Texas right now, they're waking up with like chronic GI pain and mood swings, and they don't know what to eat, and their breadth and depth of their nutrition knowledge has been exhausted. They can sign up at Parsley. They can meet with a doctor within a week, and they can begin to understand through like a really thorough intake process, like what led up, what are the triggers and the mediators that have led up to their symptoms, and how to like rebuild their body in that way. So really proud of that. And I think it's really incredible work that our doctors and our health coaches do. And I'm just excited that more people in the world get access to it.
Yes, that is amazing. A couple more questions, just speaking of what you just said, like what is something in the health and wellness world that you're just really excited about?
Well, I don't know if I don't know if it's in health and wellness. I guess it is. I think what I'm most excited about is sort of like the intersection of like what is called conscious leadership and storytelling and play. So like maybe those three, and they're all kind of connected. I've taken a lot of courses with the authors of 15 Commitments to Conscious Leadership, Diana Chapman and Jim Defner, and they're just incredible leaders and they're incredible writers. And so I think that my sort of evolution has gone from, it came from a dark place from like, oh, I need to learn how to eat so I don't feel so sad. And that was food focused for like almost 8 years, very heavily. And I talked about some meditation and mindfulness and breathing, but I wasn't really in that world. And in the past 4 or 5 years, my evolution has just gone more to like the mind body. And so to me, I look to people like, Diana Chapman and the authors of Conscious Leadership, which they have a great book and great website and trainings.
Writing it down.
For me to help understand how I can shift and play with like my own energy, my own life every day as things happen. So I'm actually most interested in that, because that's really the work that I do with people. When I work with people, I actually teach a lot of the concepts at Parsley Health where I work. I run workshops for our leadership teams and our leaders in the company on conscious leadership, and what does it mean to ultimately embrace a life of play and to be curious. And that's the stuff that to me is my own work, right? I think we teach what we need to learn, frankly.
Right.
And that's the stuff that I'm in right now. And, who knows where I'll be in 5-10 years with regards to teaching and learning. But right now, that's the space that I like.
Oh, I love it. And just because I'm personally curious, what are a couple tips that you have for someone who wants to play more?
Well, I would say, number one, you have to be present in your body. You won't know that you need to play if you're just all up here and you're just like on a rampage to get shit done and like, text people back and just be like barely breathing, chest breathing, like you won't know unless you're in your body. So one of the first tenets of conscious leadership is breathing and meditation on moving and like actually getting into the body. You begin to tell really quickly that the body doesn't lie. The mind can tell you all kinds of stories, but the body doesn't lie. And so when you come into the body and you see, ooh, I'm tense, I'm not breathing, my hands are sweaty, my thoughts are racing. Okay, I ask myself, am I willing to shift? Am I willing to get out of this space, or do I want to stay stuck in this space? And that's a choice. Most people don't want to shift. They want to stay exactly where they are in their shitstorm of drama, and they like it because it feeds their dopamine, and they get to talk to people and gossip about their crap. And so most people don't want to shift and play. Let's be very, very honest. And sometimes I don't want to shift. I'm just pissed, or I'm angry, or I'm like, that was hard, and how could that happen? But what you do is you ask yourself, am I willing to shift and play? And if someone says yes, then you begin the journey of doing lots of different techniques that might help you get out of that. And they say that in neuroscience, emotions last 90 seconds, so that from the moment they arise, let's say someone yells at you and startles you and fear comes in, fear is going to last about between 2 seconds to 90 seconds in my human physiology. If it lasts more than that, it's because the neural, like sort of cognitive looping in my brain, all the thought patterns, is keeping that emotion going. It's fueling the emotion. So for 2 and 3 days, if I'm continually obsessed about someone scaring me when they walk in the room, it's because I haven't stopped talking about it. I've brought the story with me everywhere I've gone. I've probably posted on Instagram about it. I probably Googled it. And then therefore, so it's this fear that was 12 seconds, right, of my life, whatever it is now a state. It's an identity. It becomes someone sort of like, on their LinkedIn profile, for God's sake. So ultimately, they ask themselves, do I want to shift? And they say, yes, I'm willing to shift. I don't want to feel this feeling anymore. And there's techniques. You could be playful. You could walk around the ground and crawl like a baby and complain about your issue for 2 minutes. You could hold your tongue and gossip about your issue for 30 seconds. You could create a script. You could say, Sarah, I'm going to teach you how to get my problem. And I could create all the movie characters that you're going to need in your life to get my problem. Because my problem is super serious and it's a big fucking deal, pardon my language. And, this is how I'm going to show you how to get what I have, which is a really big problem. And when you start to do that, you start to realize how insane you're being, and then you can laugh, and it doesn't mean that the emotions are invalid. It doesn't mean that you weren't traumatized or you won't have to work through something. However, it just means that you can breathe for 20 seconds. And then you get to continue to ask yourself, do I want to continue on with this narrative for the rest of my life, or do I want to create a new narrative? And so that's kind of the ways that you check in, ask yourself, am I willing to shift, and that you might shift.
I have chills. Oh my gosh. I feel like you've already changed someone's life with this conversation. So no, thank you. That's amazing. And when I think of play, I imagine of trampoline. So I eventually want to have a yard where I have a trampoline in the back. And if that ever happens to me, I'll just go jump on the trampoline for 10 minutes. I think that's going to be my shtick.
Jump on your bed too, as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
I did that one time I had these like bedposts anyway, and I like twirled. The bedposts aren't there anymore. That was TMI. My last question for you is, since I ask everyone this because I love it, and I think a lot of people are interested in morning routines. What is your morning routine?
Well, it changes all the time, to be honest. When I'm not being super sharp and disciplined with my own like self-care, which happens, it's a total process. Sometimes I wake up, I get my alarm, and I check my phone, and I'm looking at things. I'm opening apps and emails, and that's not a good morning for me. I generally feel super disconnected, but it happens, and so I try to not beat myself up about it. But a lot of mornings I wake up, and sounds whatever it sounds like, I don't really care. Sometimes if I'm feeling a little sad or anxious, again, because it's like the world and like existing is a really cool thing, but it's also super challenging, right? So like we also have the most complex thing on the planet, which is called the human brain. And no one's ever really given us many tools until we, shit hits the fan to manage it and to work with it. And so sometimes I wake up and I'll just talk to myself and I'll be like, hey, Lisa, like today I want you to work on this, or I'll talk to God or to spirit and I'll be like, thank you for this sun. Thank you for this bed. Thank you for these pillows. Thank you for this cat. I'll just kind of talk out loud like that if I feel like I need to shift things right away. And then, what I've been trying to do in the last like 4 or 5 months with COVID is I've been trying to really move my body in the morning first thing and to work out. I eat food, I drink some matcha, I do all those things. I try to check in with like the pets around me. I have 2 cats and they're wonderful. And I try to look at outside, look at nature. So it's a lot of movement. It's the drinks that I drink. It's checking in with myself and figuring out where do I want to put my energy today. And some days it's really easy and some days it's hard. And that's the work. There's no other day in my life where it's going to be like all rosy. And I think that's part of the illusion that people kind of buy into is like, once you know the things and you have the things, you're going to be good for life. And it's not meant to be that way. That's not a rich journey. But those are the things I do when I'm on my morning routine, feeling a bit more reined in.
Yeah. Sounds very spacious. I love that. I think everyone could benefit for taking some time in the morning to sort of get their day off on the right foot. And I think gratitude is a big part of that. I think movement is a big part of that. And I'm mostly just taking some time to just be with yourself, if you can. I mean, people always like ask how you fit that in. And, you know, I'm lucky where I don't have to wake up with an alarm now, but on days that I do, I set my alarm back 30, 45 minutes so that I have that time in my day, because I do, like you, notice that it can make or break, like depending on how you kind of start. So I think that's beautiful.
Yay. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Elisa. You're just so amazing. And I'm so glad to have just had this conversation. I know so many people will benefit with it. So again, so appreciative. And I know that we will connect on the interwebs, and hope this is, you know, the first of many conversations to come. So
yes. And thank you for having me. Very, very proud of all that you're doing, and excited to see
right back at you.
How you surf the waves and what's next for you. So
thank you. Thank you. All right. We'll talk soon. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.